few years ago, I went camping in the Lake District with my good friend Craig, a writer from Newcastle. We had a reasonable tent, questionable food, and an overdose of optimism. On the first night, Craig returned to his tent early to get a good night's sleep. I sat outside my tent as the sun went down and watched the light change. No phone, no particular thought, just the hill doing what hills do, entirely indifferent to the fact that I was watching. I slipped into deep thought. There's a kind of library that every culture builds. The shelves look different, the languages change, the covers change, the centuries stack up in different orders. But if you read carefully, you begin to notice something. The books are largely the same book, the same struggles for meaning, for power, for peace, the same proposed solutions, the same failures, the same proposals. Again, the human narrative is very old, and it's very good at recycling itself with each new generation. We tend to assume the goal is to find balance within the narrative, the right politics, the right beliefs, the right relationship to work and rest and one another. But balance, in the deepest sense, cannot be found inside the narrative at all. Not because the narrative is bad, but because it is a loop. Every era believes it is close to a resolution. Every era is succeeded by another era with the same belief. And our individual contributions, our ideas, our movements, our loudest moments tend in time to become a sentence, and then a footnote, and then silence. A very few become a paragraph, a name that persists a while longer, but even those names thin out eventually. The narrative moves on. That is what narratives do. One of the ways I've found to live with this, not to solve it but to keep it from becoming suffocating, is to go outside and write poetry, not to a desk by a window or a cafe with a view, actually outside into open land with a notebook, in whatever weather is on offer. What I'm doing when I go out like that is inhabiting a threshold. On one side is the human narrative, the accumulation of language and meaning, an argument we are all constantly swimming in. On the other side is nature. Nature preceded our narrative and will outlast it. The poem, when it comes, lives on that threshold. It's a different kind of footnote, not one that gets filed and forgotten in the archive of human endeavour, but one that stays alive in the act of making. The going out and the attending are the same thing. You don't go out and then start listening. The going out is the listening. That first evening outside the tent, I wasn't writing, but the quality of attention was the same. The fells were doing nothing in particular and doing it magnificently. At some point, I realised I had stopped composing sentences in my head, stopped narrating the experience to some imagined audience, stopped locating myself in relation to everything else. I was just there. It lasted perhaps 20 minutes. Then I got cold and went to bed. Now here is what I've come to understand slowly through years of walking out with a notebook and occasionally a tent. In nature, you are not a character in anyone's story. You are a voice, an answer to the long unfinished question of what it means to exist at all. The call into being that every living thing answers, each in its own way at its own moment. And when that voice falls silent, when your moment passes, you don't become a footnote. You become the soil of the future. The becoming doesn't end with you, it continues through you. What you were, what you loved, what you noticed, what you quietly changed in the people around you. None of this gets filed and forgotten. It enters the ground of what comes next. The next voice answers from somewhere that includes you. That is a different kind of permanence than the paragraph. It is quieter. It asks for nothing. The poet knows this before the philosopher does. The next morning we walked. And somewhere on that ascent the same thing happened again. The narrative dropped away and there was just the effort and the air, and the particular way the light was filling the valley below. No footnotes, no paragraphs, just the fact of being there, moving through it, answering something I couldn't have named. That, I think, is what we are when we are most ourselves, not the position holder or the meaning seeker. Something older, something that was here before the story started and recognises in open land a kind of home. The invitation I want to leave you with is to notice, perhaps just once this week, a moment when the narrative loosens. When the loop goes quiet, it might be outside, it might be in stillness, it might be in a quality of attention you felt before without quite naming it. You are not a footnote, you were never going to be saved by becoming a paragraph. You're a voice answering the call into being. I'll leave the last word to the poem I wrote that weekend. It says what I've been trying to say, but arrived there first and more honestly.
Come all you young rounders, and a story I'll tell of the promise of heaven and the warning of hell. Take heed where you ramble, or too soon you will go way up on